folks, welcome back to another Poem Massive video. So today I thought I'd do a video updating like last year's video that I did on this, which is, you know, for new players who are picking up this game, or, you know, free-to-play players, just going over some of the characters that you could get generally for either free or at a very low cost. Low cost meaning like gem-wise, not like actual money, right? Like relatively easy to obtain units. And because there's a lot of them and there's a lot of good ones, right? In this game, there's one thing is that this game has some very powerful free-to-play units, right? And I'll go over some recommendations for folks to focus on in the game early on. Again, if you're new to the game, so if you're a veteran player already, again, you could also skip this video as well. But yeah, let's go over some sync pairs then. So starting off, let's go from the main story, because the main story does have some nice ones. In the PML arc, obviously, you know, every other few chapters you get to get a free unit, right? Not every chapter, but every few chapters you get a free one. And for those, let's talk about a few of them. All right, so these are most, or actually all of the story sync pairs that you get from the PML arc main story, right? Not the, you know, not anything else, just PML arc wise, right? So there's a few good ones. Do keep in mind some of them do kind of need their sync grids, full sync grids to be more impactful, which you could use 3 or 4 star move candies, which generally aren't super hard to obtain. If you're newer, you'll probably accumulate them a bit slower, but those get handed out like literal, you know, candy, right, every single month, so you don't have to worry too much about them. So let's go over some pretty decent ones. So let's go over one by one. I'd say Pikachu, probably don't really focus too much on this Pikachu. This Pikachu, unless you want to be funny and run like triple Pikachu, then otherwise it's not extremely useful. How it really depends. It really depends. If you don't have either of the new Master Fairs, right? If you don't have Red, if you don't have Ash, How is a really nice electric type damage dealer to focus on. But if you do have those, How is close to almost irrelevant. I say almost because you could still use him in Legendary Gauntlet as an extra unit in there, but generally not super useful if you already have the other two. This Erica is alright. This Erica is alright. Wouldn't be like a priority I would focus on, but you know, later on, if you done leveling up some of the other stuff, she is something that's nice. She has a pretty decent chance to debuff the opponent's special defense with Energy Ball on a roll 2 over here, right? And then you have guaranteed paralysis would be very nice in certain legendary gauntlets, right? But again, it could also tank a bit, but this is not something I would focus on like immediately, but maybe a bit more down the line once you get a bit more, you know, move candies and stuff, and she could be a nice unit. Mullane does not have his grid yet, but once Mullane does get his sync grid at the end of this month on the 25th, Mullane's going to be very powerful. Very powerful as a steel type damage dealer, right? At the moment specifically, he's not good at all. But once the 25th hits, gets his expanded sync grid, and if you do have move candies to use on him, he could be a very solid steel type damage dealer that you could use. If you really need some other steel type damagers, there's another one at the moment that you could also go for, so don't worry too much about that. Moving on, Nanu's a very good one to level up. Nanu's a fantastic free-to-play option to level up. I'd highly recommend to work on him. Although, to be fair, Nanu also doesn't have his sync grid expanded yet until the 25th, and Nanu is a unit overall. You don't have to invest into him too much. I mean, the ideal situation is you'd get all your units maxed out, you know, in the end game wise. But you know, there are certain units you maybe at the moment you don't have to go too crazy on. Nanu's one of them because none of his stuff really comes from like his stats or whatever. It's mostly the chance to debuff the opponent's defense by 2 over here with Screech, and then, you know, X speed, which helps. I guess speed stat would be nice, but otherwise, right? He's not tanking, he's not doing damage. He's here to debuff the opponent's physical defense, so your units do more damage, right? And also flinch. So you don't have to invest too much into him, but do pick him up to use him really nice. Price is something you could generally ignore. He's not very good. There are better ice type units. Brock is pretty decent. Right, Brock is pretty decent. I'd say same with Erica. Something you could put on the back burner, right? Not something you should focus on immediately, but eventually it could be really nice, especially with, again, with the expanded sync grid. You got some defense crush on Rock Throw. You got overwhelm on Rock Throw, which could debuff the opponent's physical attack and defense, which could be nice, right? You got potions with Master Healer over here. You have pretty decent, I guess, physical defense once you do get him to, you know, 5-star, right? You got a nuke with like Haymaker. He's pretty decent, but not something I'd focus on immediately. But down the line would be nice. Same thing with the Misty. Solid unit, right? Maybe not something you want to focus on immediately, but down the line, once you have more resources to free up, she could be pretty nice. You got X special defense all, which is special defensive buff, which is nice. She could do some pretty good water type damage, but there are also, again, better units to do that. So if you want a water type damage healer, even though she's a support that could do some pretty good water damage, there are better water type damage healers, right? So evasion, gradual heal, she's just a really, really nice special tank. Although, again, don't have to focus on her immediately. Moving on, Koga is very, very, very good. Once you do get some, you know, 4-star tech candies, Koga is a pretty, I'd say pretty high priority to use them on, because at 3 out of 5 you do get Venoshock Mind Games, which is a guaranteed special defense debuff, right? He's basically like the special defense version of Nanu. Not as good as Nanu in terms of, you know, that, but you also do have with Koga the chance to badly poison the opponent, which in a lot of case scenarios could come really handy, especially in certain legendary arenas, gauntlets, or to trigger some poison multipliers. Koga is definitely very good. They're also very fast as well, right? So with Koga, really nice. Clear, I would definitely not recommend for new players. It's not that she's like terrible or whatever. If you build like the perfect team comp for Clear's damage potential is actually really, really nice. That's the issue. It's very, very hard to get her perfect team comp. You'd have to, her absolute perfect team comp, you need like SS Chris, which is a Master Fair, right? And you need Lucas Dialga, which is relatively, you know, hard to get as well. So or Claire over here, I would not really recommend. Not very new player friendly. Her team comp requirements are relatively high, right? Not a very new player friendly unit over here. Moving on, Tyranitar is just bad. Viola is pretty nice. Viola is pretty nice. Again, same with the other Ericas or whatever. You don't have to do her immediately, but once you do free up some resources, she is very, 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 very good. She has a lot of things going for her. She has Trap, right? She could trap opponents, which again could help bypass certain damage reduction passives and gauntlets, which is nice. Can activate multipliers for units, your offensive units. She has X speed that helps her as well, right? She could take a few hits, at least special hits, with also Struggle Bug to debuff the opponent's AoE, debuff special attack as well, right? She got gradual healing, special defense buffs for yourself. She is really, really, really nice. Yeah, her grid isn't like super crazy. You don't really need much of her grid. There are nice things like first aid or whatever in her grid, but those aren't not really like necessary, right, to make her grid work. Torkoal at the moment is not the greatest. She could like help take some like physical hits, maybe she could help burn the opponent, but otherwise not that great of a unit. Flint and Infernape also not great. There are just better fire type options, right? So yeah, there is that. Barry is a special unit, right? It's a weird unit, right? So he does require a bit of resource investment into him, right? For example, you kind of want to have him 6-star EX, but once you actually do, and if you have the perfect team for him, again, perfect team for him, relatively hard, right? Relatively hard. It's kind of like Claire, except just more worth it, I find, just because his nuke is very, very powerful. Very powerful nuke over here from Barry, especially if you do have him 6-star EX, right? A very, very powerful striker, AoE, water nuke. But again, relatively hard to invest into, because again, you'd want him to, like 6-star EX, you want his full grid, and then you want units that could activate most, if not all, his multipliers, stuff like inertia. Well, I guess he could also get that himself, but like his offensive buffs, for example, right? So maybe you want something like a SS Chris with rain and offensive buffs, and then you want someone to debuff the opponent's speed with like Dojo Gloria. So it is hard. It is hard. So this is like a very, very late project, but you know, once you do get it, it should be nice. Karina is not very good. I would generally not recommend focusing on her. Rosa is not great either. There are just better options for special attack buffers. Skyla is okay-ish, right? She buffs your speed, buffs defense. She's just a nice tank that buffs speed, right? Nice tank that buffs the speed, has a chance to flinch if you really want, and can heal. But otherwise, there are also better tanks. Haxorus is not great. Calum can be decent, but requires a lot of investment. I would not recommend. It is a 5-star, right? So if you do want to expand its synchro, you have to invest 5-star candies into it, which is you don't want to invest 5-star candies onto Calum over like other units, right? Valerie is not good. Hapu is not very good. She is getting her grid expanded, but the grid expansion doesn't really, it's not great either. Acerola is something you probably want to prioritize, right? She is a free Sandstorm setter. Is she the best Sandstorm setter? No, but she is a Sandstorm setter. But she's a pretty decent one in ways, right? Because you do have Sandstorm. You do have, Astonish to flinch opponents. The only thing is, if you are a new player, you won't really have most of her grid unlocked. Would I recommend spending move candies on her? Not really. I would say it's just better to get a stronger Sandstorm setter at the moment, right? Like an Ingo or something. But if you do have the chance / opportunity, but for a very, very basic Sandstorm setter, she's all right. Yeah, she's all right. It's just that you don't have stuff like what is it? You don't have like your move gauge refresh on Astonish, right? But you do have like a lot of decent stuff at 1 to 5. Oh, you don't have a focus group. That's the one, right? To buff crit. But you do have like MP refresh on Sandstorm. You got aggravation on Astonish, which increases your chance to flinch, which is pretty nice. But otherwise, she's an okay unit over here. So that's all the story units. So let's move on. So next in the story section, we have the legendary adventures. Do all of these. All of these are good units. Every single one of them are good. Plus, they're cool. They're like legendary Pokemon. Like, come on. Unless you're one of those like people who really, really hate legendary Pokemon. But like, even if you do hate legendary Pokemon, they're all strong units. Every single one of them are incredibly strong, right? And you should go for them. You should go for them. So in these legendary, like main story legendary adventures, I think that's the new name it's called. The legendary adventures, you only do get like their base, right? So you get the unit, you get enough power ups to give them 20 out of 20, and then you get their more copies to expand their sync grid. But what you don't get is power boosts and EXs, right? So those you have to wait for event reruns. So they do have, a certain number of them. They go in order in terms of the villain arc releases. But, a few of them do have their EXs and power boosts. Right now it's the first 4, right? Giovanni, Silver, Zinnia, and Cyrus. Those are the ones that have power boosts and EXs, right? So power boosts, for those who don't know, it depends on the unit. Some units get, sync grid expansions, like Ho-Oh got a few more sync nodes, which are all really nice. Cyrus got a few sync nodes that are all really good as well. And then, for example, for Mewtwo, power boost means he gets, he turns Mewtwo into Mega Mewtwo Y. And some units like Zinnia get both, extra sync grids, extra sync grid nodes, and also Mega Rayquaza, right? So those are events. They come back periodically, every few months they come back. So don't worry about them. You will get them. But at the moment, even without those, these are all really, really nice units as well, right? Mewtwo is a really, really good Psychic and Ghost type damage dealer. Ho can set Sun, also a good Fire type damage dealer, and Nuker, also decent Grass type damage dealer as well. Zinnia and Cyrus are both good Dragon type damage dealers. Zinnia is also a great Flying type damage dealer. Cyrus is a top tier Water type damage dealer. And then Ketsus and Kyurem is a offensive debuffer, as well as a Ice type Nuker. Could do some Ice DPS AoE, but still Ice type DPS. Xerneas is one of the, better tanks in the game. It has Horn Leash to always heal itself. It can buff your team's speed, special attack, and special defense. Only on sync, but still, right? And also, it doesn't have 6R EX yet, so you do kind of waste your sync there. But that aside, it's still a decent... still a decent unit. If you're super, super, super down bad on fairy type damage, he could give you some of that too, with Moonblast. It's not great, but it's something, right? Solgaleo is a pretty nice steel type and very nice fighting type damage dealer. And then Hop over here, Hop and Zamazenta. It's a really, really good physical defense and physical attack support, right? So, again, only the first 4 have EXs at the moment. The next 4 don't, right? So there is that. All of them are good units. Go get them all. They're all really, really good. Plus, they're cool. Next, in terms of free units, you also have BP units. These are, every time you get a certain amount of BP points, you get one of these vouchers that you can exchange for these units. These could get you 4 stars, and then the one at like the 10,000 point one gives you like 5-star units, right? This one takes a very, very, very long time, but don't worry, the 5-star ones are not good. Well, I wouldn't say they're not, but they're generally not fantastic. But the 4-star ones are actually really, really nice. So definitely go pick up some of these 4-star BP units. They are very, very powerful. The ones I would personally recommend maybe focusing on first would be Lieutenant Surge. Definitely very, very good physical offensive buffer, and also Janine and Crobat, really nice mixed offensive buffer. And Clement is a really, really nice, physical defense debuffer. Can paralyze as well. And if you need Hail, you could go for Frostlass. And if you need a few damage dealers, Xenia Salamence is a decent damage dealer. Umbreon's a decent damage dealer. And then this Golem's pretty nice as well. And Morty Mismagius, if you are, if you need an extra tank in like a legendary gauntlet or something, Morty Mismagius could be a pretty decent tank. And then Erica and Tangela is also, I'd say, mainly for gauntlet, right? So Morty and Erica, I would say those 2 are more so for gauntlet, right? So if you're a new player, gauntlet is one of the hardest modes in the game, so you don't have to worry about them too much. They are really, really good there, but you don't have to worry about them immediately, right? These are more like end game ish units, right? Maybe even Xenia and Salamence a bit. Just team comps are slightly, difficulter to get. And also, you don't have to worry about Sophocles Golem if you did pull one of the anniversary Pikachus, right? It is electric type damage dealer, so there is that. But Karen could be a nice, dark type damage dealer over here. I did a more detailed video going over the BP unit, so you could check that one out instead if you want to go through those. There are also like event limited sync pairs like this Persian, Arcanine, Psyduck, right? Those are event limited. In terms of like acquiring them, please go get them. They're all free and they end in a certain amount of days. But in terms of which one to like focus on to level up first, I'd say Persian of these 3 that are up right now is probably the one that you want to go for the most, right? In terms of again, just focusing on using our resources on. The other 2, I wouldn't worry too much about. Again, Misty would be more helpful late game in Legendary Gauntlet. Blue and Arcanine is a nice fire type damage dealer, but I would focus on something like Silver and Hole first as your, free fire type damage dealer rather than Blue and Arcanine. And there's also a Bugsy and Scyther that's very, very nice. It's not up right now, but might rerun soon, hopefully. So there's also that. That if they do drop that one, you should go for that one. That's really, really good. Let's see what else. So there's also the Victory Road. You do get, I think, after you beat Singsu Red, you do get a ticket over here. That ticket gives you a chance to pick one of either Singsu Red, Blue, or Leaf. And I did do a video more detailed going over those, but you really can't go too wrong with either of them. I do feel like Leaf's team comps are a bit more complicated to run, so I'd say maybe not Leaf. Leaf is more of like a late game-ish unit. The other 2 are relatively easy and not very complex to use. So if you want a fire type damage dealer, you got SS Red, but also again you also have Silver for free. But yeah, and then Blue's just a nice support that buffs everything at a very slow pace, but it buffs things, right? So yeah, do pick those up as well. Those are really, really nice. If you can't beat the Victory Road, there are some stages that are slightly tricky. It's like solving puzzles mostly. I do have a video on that as well. You could check that out on the channel to beat the Victory Road. So there's also that. The last group over here are summable 3-star, 4-stars. These aren't technically like, you could get them completely free. You do have to spend gems, but the drop rates for these are like crazy. Like you guys already probably have like 10s, 20s, like maybe even hundreds of these. So they're like everywhere. So yeah, it's not very hard to get them. But yeah, for these Summable 3-star, 4-stars, there's a lot of really nice ones as well. I'll just go for like one of well, in terms of damage dealers, I'll go over like one of each type for damage dealers, and then there's also again supports that we'll talk about. I mean, almost all the supports are pretty decent. Let's see I guess Marlins. Okay, let's go over supports first. So, all right, in terms of supports, Marley's a decent support. It's not something that I would recommend using, like leveling up like first. She's decent, but a lot of the comps that you do run on her, the thing is she doesn't really buff too many things, so it might be a bit harder to fit her onto like specific teams, right? But she's pretty good. Gives your team speed, right? Status condition, defense. You got team sharp entry, which could buff some crits. Hostile environment to burn opponents. So again, usually, units that status or interfere, they're more so for legendary gauntlet, right? So that is more down the line stuff. Cheryl is dangerous of a unit to use. She's a solid support in terms of what she buffs. She buffs you special attack mainly, right? Gives you special attack, could buff defenses as well, also heals. It's a single target buffer, right? So, or I guess healer / defensive buffer. But like her main issue is her stats. If you look at her stats, she has a lot of special defense, no physical defense, right? A lot of HP. So she's a very specific unit. So if you have like a stage that almost exclusively uses like special moves, and you have a bit of an issue with that, then you could maybe level up your Cheryl and combat it with that. But otherwise, don't use her on physical defense stages. Maylene is pretty good. She doesn't have a grid yet, but she's pretty good. Despite that, she has Rock Smash, which could debuff the opponent's defenses. At the moment, there's no honor roll, so it's just 50% instead of like guaranteed, but that's still pretty nice. And you have attack buffs and then crit buffs. Also gives sure hit as well. It's not max crit buffs, only +2 crit and only +4 physical attack. So it's not as good as something like a Lieutenant Surge or Hop or whatever. So I'd still focus on those first before Maylene, but after those, if you want extra, physical attack support, this is definitely one of the units you could go for. I guess one of the other downsides, she's a bit slow, but shouldn't be that big of a deal. Like, it's not her base speed, but she is like a 2-gauge damage dealer, right? Or not a damage, like a 2-gauge move user as a support. So there is that. Eliza's very very good, right? She is really nice. She buffs both attack and special attack for your team. So she's a mixed offensive buffer, like whatever use you need her for, she could do it. In terms of that category, you have special defense buffs as well. She's a pretty good special defensive tank. She is pretty slow, but she does have a 1-gauge spam, so that helps a bit. And she's just overall really nice support. She's would be a priority. Drake is a defensive buffer. Again, defensive supports generally are a bit more useful in Gauntlet rather than some of the earlier content. Or even Master Mode, so Drake wouldn't give him too much of a priority. Roxanne is also very good. It gives you both speed and special attack on this trainer move, which is fantastic. And then you got defenses as well, so she's a very good, highly recommend to level up and use earlier on. Marlon's not good, so ignore Marlon for the moment being. He might be better later on, but at the moment not really. Let's look for some techs. So the first two, Ramos and not Ramos. I guess Ramos and Agatha. These two are hypnosis and sleep powder spammers. These are very good. It might be a bit harder to use for newer players, but you could basically in this game sleep chain the opponent so they never really hurt you. Unless they'll still use their trainer moves most time, not Legendary Arena, but sometimes they'll still use like their trainer moves, so they will still like sink you once the sync move countdown hits 0, but they won't use their regular moves to attack you, so that could be really nice if you want to cheese some stages. Although generally it's better a lot of times just to just tank it with like a good tank instead. But anyways, that's what those two do. They're pretty good at it. All right. Blaine is a very, very good unit. Highly recommend. Again, it's a sunsetter at sunny day. Highly recommend to, get him up early, fast, right? Very, very powerful to use with your fire type damage dealers. Lieutenant Surge, low-key, really, really nice too. Not something I would go for immediately, but it is a special attack debuffer that is really, really fast. Yeah, not a priority, but definitely something later on. Lapras, ignore for the moment being, unless she gets a really good grid, but not that great at the moment. Janine also really, really nice. She's an Omni debuffer. She could be used on a lot of poison stall teams. That could be really decent. Wouldn't put her as a priority, but if you're into like poison stalling, she's really good for that. Xatu is incredibly powerful. Xatu is a damage dealer, and it deals a lot of damage, right? It's 2-gauge damage dealer based on stored power, so the more like stat buffs you give Xatu, the more powerful Xatu becomes. Especially in Psychic Terrain, Xatu is actually pretty crazy. Is it the strongest damage dealer of the 3-star 4-star gotchas? Might be. But yeah, Xatu is definitely there. Mina's pretty good for a, well, not only a physical attack debuffer, but Mina's also a pretty good fairy type damage dealer / nuker, so she could be really nice. I wouldn't say really early on to use, but eventually, if you do have the resources, Mina is a really good option. Whitney, it's a Paraflinter. More of a late game unit at the moment, not a huge deal to go for early on. Winona's a very, very good unit. Winona and Blaine, those are the two weather setters over here. Well, good weather setters, which is Winona sets rain, Blaine sets sun, right? Winona does have a grid. You don't really have to focus on the grid. Her grid's not great, right? So, if you don't want to spend resources there, you don't have to. Like, her base kit's decent enough. So she's, again, very, very good rain setter. And then you have Brawly, which is also very, very decent unit, low-key. I feel people sleep on Brawly a bit, but Brawly's pretty good. Defense debuffs, right? Guaranteed defense debuffs on Rock Smash. You also got stuff like potions for your team. He could get you a fighting nuke in as well. He's very, very nice. Lucy is kind of like a BP Erica Light. Crash Awake is very powerful. Crash Awake is very, very powerful against certain legendary gauntlet opponents. Right, he's a water type nuker. He could flinch relatively well, so he's pretty good. Thornton I wouldn't really go for early on. Same thing with Wickstrom, right? Well, I wouldn't even say same. No. They're not same. That's an insult to Wickstrom. Wickstrom is much, much better in terms of if you want a steel type damage dealer, Wickstrom is really, really good in that. Thornton's not super useful. I'm not going to say it's completely useless, but it's more of a later on thing. Candace is the hail setter. She's okay. It's just that hail units at the moment are not great overall, so I wouldn't focus too much on that. Clay, I would probably skip for the moment being until it gets a grid, maybe. Bryson is very good later on against certain legendary gauntlet opponents, but again, that's more just late game stuff, right? He's not good. Sophocles is pretty decent as a legendary gauntlet unit as well, especially against something like Tornadus, but not so much early on. As for the strikers, there's not too many great strikers in the 3-star, 4-star Summon Bowl. Gardini is fantastic, right? Gardini is probably the best one of this of this bunch, right? So I'd highly recommend going for Gardenia in terms of grass type damage. Bruno is pretty good as well. Again, you still have the option of Focus Boss Solgaleo, so if you don't, want to waste resources, I'd recommend using resources on Solgaleo rather than Bruno. It's just cheaper to invest into Solgaleo, just because you get all that, power-ups for free and all that stuff. Also, Solgaleo could double as a steel-type damage dealer, but if you really want, Bruno's pretty good too. Nolan is pretty good as a bug-type damage dealer, low-key. Nolan's really, really nice. Let's see. Bugsy's pretty okay as well, but I'd say Nolan's better. What else? Chantel's an okay-ish ghost-type damage dealer, but again, Mewtwo's just better, right? Mewtwo's just better. So, no point, really, spending on this one. Roxanne is an okay-ish poison-type damage dealer. She's not that bad. Marshall's just not as good as Bruno. Seabull's not that good. Wolfrick's terrible. Kahili is alright, but you have, if you do have Mega Rayquaza, you could use that. If you don't, you have Blue, which is free. So there's that. So yeah, as for the strikers, I'd say mainly just Noland, Gardenia, and maybe Roxy, right? All the other ones are either not good or just outclassed by some other free units. So yeah, that's me. This one, I guess. Hope y'all enjoyed. Guys, think in the comments down below. Like, enjoy the videos for our channel for some more Power Mouse content. I'll see you guys in the next one then.